Hello everyone, I'm standing here in the beautiful Budapest. My bags are packed, I'm on my way back to South Africa. We just finished CPAC Hungary 2025 and I want to share with you some thoughts, or you could say a message to people in South Africa, the Afrikaners and other communities living within South Africa, and also to our friends abroad, especially in the USA, about the narrative that is happening with regard to South Africa, especially based on what I have learned and come to experience over these past few days at CPAC. But before we do that, let me share some comments and feedback about the conference. It was an incredible conference hosted by the Center for Fundamental Rights here in Hungary. Pardon the city noises in the background. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and more successful. So this year, the conference was attended once again by thousands of people from all over the world. And there were four current prime ministers and four former prime ministers speaking at this event. And I am very grateful for the fact that I've been invited to be a speaker at this conference. I participated on a panel discussion where I spoke about what's happening in South Africa. I made some remarks about the recent meeting in the White House and also what we think in terms of the way forward. And what's remarkable about this conference is not just the opportunity to speak, but if you are invited as a speaker, obviously you have access to the speakers lounge. So you have an opportunity to speak with all the other speakers and engage with them and so forth. So speaking at a conference like this is fantastic, but that's the second best. The best is the networking opportunities. And I was able to meet with so many people from all over the world and have discussions with them about South Africa, about the Afrikaners, about what we ought to do, about what we can do. And there's just too many to mention, including some prime ministers, including people like the people at the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles. I had a chat with both of them. Politicians from all over the world, but especially conservative parties in Europe, leading conservative parties or leading political parties who are winning elections, including leaders of political parties in the Netherlands, in Belgium, Flanders, in Poland, Hungary, Austria, Italy, and many others. These are just the ones I can think of quickly with whom we had conversations. Also members of the European Union, the European Parliament, and think tanks from all over the world, not just the Hungarian think tanks, but think tanks all over the world. And the great thing about think tanks, or the important thing about think tanks one ought to consider, is we don't have many think tanks. We have some think tanks in South Africa, but which are playing an important role, but the extent to which think tanks influence public policy, especially in America and in Europe, should not be underestimated. Also in Hungary, but in other European countries as well. And what was another thing that was remarkable is that I'm not exaggerating when I say that every single person I spoke to at this conference, and even just in the streets here in Hungary, and we had some form of a conversation about South Africa. Every single one of them mentioned the recent meeting in the White House, say that they have watched it, asked for my views about this meeting, and I asked them for their views. And without exception, they all think that it was a big embarrassment for the South African government, not just people at CPAC. I'm talking about taxi drivers here in Budapest and people I've been speaking with just in walking around in the city. And that there's a serious crisis in South Africa, that they are aware of this, and that this has to be addressed. And in as far as the South African government and the ruling party in South Africa continues to deny the problem, the existence of the problem, or continues to justify things like the Kill the Boer chant and so forth, they are only digging their own hole deeper and deeper. And this has to stop. And so what is really incredible about this is not that long ago, I remember going to international conferences like these, speaking to people in Europe and America and other countries, and them still believing that everything is wonderful in South Africa. It's just kumbaya, and it's a miracle story, and the world should aspire to be more like South Africa. That was not long ago. More recently, I remember people starting to talk about South Africa, about recognizing that it's not working. And just looking at where we are now, there's almost, and this might be an exaggeration, there's almost universal recognition that there's a very serious problem in South Africa. And I say it might be an exaggeration because you would always have those bad actors, people on the left and so forth, who are just hell-bent on denying the problem because they want to implement the same policies that the South African government is implementing. And so they want to deny that the problem exists, or they want to say that it's good. Or they want to say, like some people in South Africa are now saying, quite bizarrely, that number one, South Africa needs race laws. We need more race laws. Race laws are good for us. But when someone points out that there are race laws, they deny that the race laws exist. So depending on the context, in a certain context, they would celebrate the existence of race laws and say we need more of them. And in another context, they would deny that there are race laws, which is really bizarre. And I'll say something more about that later. But I think in that sense, at least, we are making a lot of progress. And what I have said at this conference is we are really not happy about the problem in South Africa. We are saddened by the situation in South Africa. But given that this is the reality, we are very grateful that people are taking note of this problem. Under the circumstances, we are very grateful for the recognition and so forth. And so, in terms of what I would like to say to our friends abroad and to our friends, to the Afrikaners and our friends in South Africa, I want to make a quick remark about the narrative. It's not conducive to a solution if the only thing that happens in South Africa is for people to get refugee status and leave the country. Because many people won't leave, but the fewer we are, the more difficult it would be. And so in a certain sense, if we have, for example, just an exodus out of South Africa of Afrikaners or minorities or the white minority, many would stay behind. It would lead to more instability in South Africa. If, for example, the farmers leave, commercial farmers and so forth, employers, people who employ a lot of people leave, it would lead to more instability and it would lead to more persecution in South Africa. And so the whole issue of refugee status is a good thing in the sense that it places the emphasis on what's happening in South Africa. But if that's all that happens, it's not that good. And we need to talk about this. We need to manage or steer the narrative away from the belief that the solution to South Africa, to the crisis in South Africa, is simply to get people out, towards an understanding that what South Africa needs is a rethinking of the political system. What South Africa needs is a decentralization of the political system, of the government, of bringing the government closer to people and promoting self-governance for the peoples and the communities who live in South Africa. And so it's one thing to celebrate refugees leaving South Africa because that's a way to get to the ANC, to relish in the fact that taxpayers are leaving. But we should also recognize that for many people on the left, many of these extremists, this is exactly what they want. So we must be careful to relish in giving them what they want. We need to work towards a solution. And the situation with the refugees is very good for focusing the eyes of the world on what is happening in South Africa. But help us steer that narrative towards one in which there is a much bigger and a much more important conversation about what could be done to address these issues. Thank you very much.